Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us for our webinar today. I am happy to see you all. As people are joining, I will give you a few of the ground rules of how we are going to be doing this today. So very shortly, I'm going to be showing you a presentation and I'm going to go over the benchmarks, the playbooks, and the quiz of the AI Profit Toolkit. If you have any questions, there is a dedicated Q&A section in Zoom, so just click that, add your questions there, and once I'm done, in the end, I will take a look at all of the questions and I will answer those that I have time for. In the meantime, I have a couple of colleagues here with me to help me moderate and talk to you. So if you have anything else that you want to chat about or ask about, you can use the chat in the webinar. And other than that, I hope you have a good time and I hope that you enjoy hearing me talk for this hour. Now, as you all know, the webinar is titled the AI Profit Toolkit, Benchmarks, Playbooks, and Quick Wins. This is exactly what I'm going to be talking about today, and the webinar itself is going to be separated into those three main parts. As you can see here, this is a more detailed description of what we are going to be doing today. The overall theme of today's talk is very much illustrated by Mr. William DePetra, a client of mine who we have a very good relationship with for a very long time. And as the head of AI, he says that, do we really need AI for that? And this is basically what we are going to be answering here today. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about myself and where I come from and why I have the ideas that I have. We're going to be looking at the market and the benchmarks that it has. We're going to be looking at the playbooks that we personally use and that other market participants use in order to apply AI solutions. And I'm going to be discussing several case studies and examples of how different companies approach AI implementations in their day-to-day. So first and foremost, who am I? My name is Max. As you probably already know, I am the Chief Business Development Officer at Sigli. We are a tech company. We create custom software solutions for our clients all over the world, basically. That gives me the perspective of implementing real projects into real businesses day in, day out, both large and small. But that is not the only point of view that I'm going to be sharing with you today. I'm also the host of the InnoVantage podcast, where I interview a bunch of different people, namely experts in their fields from government, from education, from private sector, and they all have their own opinions. And I have explored those opinions with them a lot of the time, and they have shared some of their examples as well. And this creates kind of the second point of view that I have within myself on the current market situation and the current AI implementation processes. The third is I am also a public speaker and a mentor at different communities, but one that you are probably all familiar with is Plug and Play, an accelerator for startups. So this gives me the third point of view of what is the cutting edge of technology, what kind of startups are being accepted, which ones are the runner-ups and which ones are the leaders of the industry, and what is going on basically at the ground level of innovation. Combining these 3 points of view, I will hopefully give you an overview of what is going on in the market and how can you benefit from a better understanding of AI solutions. About Sigli itself. So we are based out of Lithuania. On the photo here, you can see our offices. This is basically where I am. This is what you see behind me. We are about 100 people, so we are not a huge company, but at the same time, we are not extremely small. So we have seen larger enterprises, we have seen mid-level businesses, and we have seen smaller businesses struggle to adapt AI. Some succeed, some do not. And that's the kind of the main source of my day-to-day experience at the end of the day. So let's talk a little bit about the benchmarks. You are probably aware of the hype cycle, and we are definitely within the AI hype cycle right now. But I have been working in tech for a pretty long time, more than 10 years. I'm not old and gray just yet, but I've had my share of hype cycles over the years. I have seen the rise of IoT, I have seen the rise of blockchain, I have seen the rise of, I don't know, like RPA and many different things that come and go, but AI seems to be the loudest of the things that we have come to know and love over the last decade or so. And everybody has the same question, like, where are we on that AI hype cycle? Where is the actual practical implementation? And according to Gartner, to November last year, we are entering the drought of disillusionment. So this is where the markets begins to understand that the possibilities of AI are not limitless. They understand the limitations of it. There's a lot of failed projects that dictate kind of the disappointments of what our dreams could have been and what the reality is. And this is still fine. This is the natural life cycle of any hype that exists. And we will see in a couple of months when Gartner releases their updated charts for this year, but I feel that we are squarely going down that road. That is both good news and bad, but more on that a bit later. In terms of specific industries, it's very hard to talk about all of them, but EdTech is one that's very close to me personally and to our company as well. So generally speaking, the markets are investing more and more and more and more into AI solutions, governments as well. There is no disillusionment on the grand scale, only on the micro scale, on the project scale, on the day-to-day implementations of managers, people working their lives, as you and me probably, on their day-to-day trying to leverage this new technology in their work. But globally, there is a lot of trust and a lot of funds behind AI solutions. And one thing that comes to mind when trying to implement those solutions is hesitation, because it's very hard to understand where to pinpoint them, which solutions are better and which ones are worse. So according to Accenture, 52% of people have seen fake news or articles nowadays. This creates, well, a lot of hesitation. It creates a lot of noise, and I guess I am also a part of that now. I'm also one voice out of many, out of thousands, out of hundreds. And 33% have experienced deepfake attacks or scams, and 39 have been fraudulent product reviews online. And you can imagine the amount of AI solutions out there, products, SaaS, just customary APIs. There's a lot of stuff out there that you can't really trust. So you're left with this wealth of knowledge, and at the end of the day, you're still on your own with your own devices and your own challenges and your own problems. What we've seen as well is that if you do succeed, if you do try to implement AI solutions, once you get over that hump, once you find that sweet spot of actually doing something valuable to your organization and to your process, then you actually feel the value. Very rarely, in 21% of the time, you will feel no value or little value, as based on the Harvard Business Review article. At the same time, we see that, at least as McKinsey tells it, the higher the level of education, the more impact theoretically AI can have. We are used to thinking about AI in directly addressing the lower educated levels of any given organization. So there's a lot of talk about junior positions being eliminated completely. And that is still true, that is a fact, but it is my belief that the most value is created at the higher levels, where more experienced people can work with less experienced people and showcase specific places in an organization that can benefit from specialized solutions and, well, that are targeted at the business values. And talking about that value it's very pretty simple. So you have different types of value, but all of it is mostly focused on productivity. And that's what a lot of AI evangelists talk about. I cannot name myself as one, so I'm definitely not an evangelist. And I wouldn't call myself a skeptic or a hater of the AI solutions themselves. Probably I wouldn't be talking about them in a way if I were. I'm definitely trying to find a common ground. And in business and in life, I see that as long as the beneficial parts outweigh the risky parts, then a common ground can be found. Otherwise, you cannot trust the hype in and of itself. It's too early for that. The hype cycle is only just past its peak. And this is the market, basically. Everybody's trying to do something. Very few people understand what specifically they want to achieve, but some are pressured from outside influences, some from inside influences. But everybody understands that something needs to happen. Otherwise, well, there's fear of being left behind. So what can you do? What realistically can you apply to your day-to-day in order to combat this? I want to come back to AI rule number 1 that stems again from William. Do not use AI unless you need it. Do not forget that software is much larger than AI solutions. If you have a sales process that you want to automate, maybe you do not need to automate it through AI. There's enough scripting tools, there's enough CRMs and ERPs out there that can help you revamp and revitalize your process without spending money and time on unproven and edge technologies. There are a lot of things right now that can address your problems a lot of the time. And you need to understand whether or not those solutions are the ones that you need, or whether you need AI. And why do you need AI specifically to address your business problems? Once you understand that, I feel that's more than halfway of success. Once you understand why specifically it is AI that you need, when you understand where you need to apply it, then everything else that I'm going to be talking about is secondary, honestly, because there's just so much discrepancy between businesses. So if you want only one thing to remember from today, remember this. So look at your situation, look at that inner voice that tells you, let's just implement AI, and ask yourself, do I really need AI for that? If you do, then great. If you don't, maybe look for something else. But in order to understand that, how do you do it? We use something we call the AI value matrix. It is adapted from a couple of different sources, but mostly it is pretty simple. And I'm going to be explaining what it is and how to use it, because we are going to be coming back to this throughout the cases that I'm going to be talking about fairly regularly. So you have basically two schools of thought when implementing any solution. You have the technological side of the question, and you have the business side of the question. And those two are often misaligned. If any of you work with digital transformation projects, for example, this is one of the key things that, well, any digital transformation process is based upon, basically, the alignment of business and technology. And those two tend to be very misaligned. Sometimes the business wants AI for AI's sake. Sometimes technologically something cannot be done. The other way around also happens. Sometimes you want to explore an exciting new technology without really understanding how it will impact the business as long as it is there. So it's a very simple, or simplified rather, grading system where you draw up your projects, you try to understand how it will impact the business, how it will impact the tech, and whether or not it's feasible through the tech, rather. And if those two things are in balance, then you choose the one that is in higher balance, because answers are rarely very cut and dry. There is always some room for thought. So talking a little bit about each particular value and how it influences the overall score. So first and foremost, it's data. As a tech company, from that perspective, I can definitely tell you that successful AI projects start with good quality data. And the larger your project, the larger your problem that you're trying to achieve, the better, and again, the larger the volume of the data that you need to have. Trying to build an AI solution using no data, at least either internally or externally, is just recipe for failure. That's where you need to answer the question of, do I need AI for that, with a resounding no, because without the data, you're probably very limited in the effectiveness of that AI solution. So it goes from 1 to 10 for each of those values. The typical pitfalls that you can see here is that you have some kind of data that is probably not in its best state. You have some CSVs saved somewhere, and they're probably in different formats being kept in different places, and you're trying to kind of combine them all into one thing and build something on top of that. And it rarely works, at least fast and at least efficiently enough until you get discouraged from the whole process. And the labeling of the data, I feel, is a very important thing. So basically unifying how a system can read that data is the most important part of it, because you don't need to have ideal data everywhere. So like I rarely see that realistically with the companies that I work with. So don't be discouraged if your data is not the best. You just need to have a step back and work on it. And it helps if you understand what kind of solution you're trying to implement and for what. So in order to help yourself, ask yourself a little bit of your questions. So do we capture the signals that we want to optimize? Does our data reflect the business value of what we're trying to achieve? So if we want to have faster customer service, do we have data supporting our current KPIs and customer service? Or do we just have data on customers as a whole, and customer service is lost somewhere inside of that data? How many duplicates of our data, or how many nulls, how many invalid values of our data do we have? What kind of culture of data keeping do we have within an organization? And when was the last time that we've actually updated our data dictionary around how we approach our data, how we work with it? And lastly, if you are within the EU and the UK, I guess as well, how are we handling consent of that data? Was it gathered legally or maybe illegally, or was it gathered so long ago that laws for it didn't exist yet? These are the typical questions that will kind of help you guide you along in understanding the situation with your data at this time. If the questions are a bit too hard to answer, don't worry. There's a couple of things that you can do to kind of expedite the process, I guess. So you can always use scripts to refine large volumes of data and make it serviceable enough. You can always deduplicate the data fast enough. Again, there's enough of both solutions and scripts and just, customary approach to data to refine any list that you're working with and any volume basically that you're working with. And yeah, adding one-click feedback loops to collect missing labels is also a very interesting and very useful approach, because the shorter the feedback loop, the easiest it is to, well, to work with the larger volume of data and refine it to a position where you can work with it. Second is technological complexity. So how hard is it to build overall the solution that we are trying to build? Best case scenario, the solution already exists. We don't really need to think about it. We just buy it, we just use it. Worst case scenario, we need to build it from the ground up. And when I mean from the ground up, I mean like hardware. Specific hardware for our use case does not exist, and specific software for that hardware needs to be created. So here there's a lot of underestimations of how much time does it take to build a data pipeline and how much time is needed to actually reach a cutting edge tech solution to a point where it's useful and where you can judge and gauge the impact of it. There's also the problem of chasing the latest, greatest trends, cutting edge, bleeding edge models when they are expensive, sometimes slower than the older models, and not always are business value oriented, so to speak. And then focusing too much on over-engineering proof of concepts that never actually benefit the business because they never leave production. So how do you check yourself here? Do we have a native feature in our current software environment? Basically, that's question number one. A lot of software has implemented their own AIs. I think that's most of enterprise software nowadays. You'd be hard pressed to find a solution that does not offer anything AI related. Is it useful? No, that's another question. But it is there. And like I said in the beginning, maybe it's not an AI solution that you need. Maybe it's just a feature that you didn't think about, but AI made you think that you might need it. And you may explore whether or not that's something that is already out there. So second is, maybe if not a solution already exists, maybe an API already exists. Maybe I can just use a solution through an API and build something small on top of that and create the best outcome for myself without investing too much into creating a customer solution. Are there any latency or throughput constraints. So like how complex is the pathways that we are building, how much time is needed for the data to travel from one end to the other and to reach the end users or the customers or whatever, and how secure the whole thing is in the end. In order to hack your way around this a little bit, so again, check whether or not there are existing APIs or documentations to work with those APIs in order to speed up the whole process, especially if you trust the vendors that provide those things. Cloud native or cloud first services are a good thing to again, kind of speed things up from trusted vendors, from trusted suppliers, that you at least can be safe on the security and the speed of it. And when we're talking pilots, it would be great to limit it to one particular critical integration, and that integration should ideally be measurable and business focused, but that's a little bit coming into the future. Lastly, or rather, next point is skills and people. Do we have the people, or can we rent or buy those people somewhere in order to do this? And this means both as just general rule, like do we have those employees working in our company, or just specifically their time, their interest, their availability for this particular project. So yeah. Worst case scenario, we have no one, we have no money to do with anything, and we cannot afford anything at all. So there are still options there that you can explore, but not the best situation. Best case scenario, we have a dedicated team that is motivated by this particular project, and all that they are going to do is focus specifically here. Pitfalls. So single hero syndrome. Somebody's an evangelist, somebody's trying to push things forward, does not really work. You need more people that are motivated in the end. Second is that teams measure effort, not outcome. So we've done a lot of stories in this particular sprint. How do these stories help us deliver a proof of concept somewhere? Nobody knows, but we've done a lot of work and we are great at doing a lot of work, which is, commendable and great. But at the end of the day, we are talking about real impact and how to profit from it. So without that, you are going to be stuck in that proof of concept phase for a long time. And the third one is just hiring somebody to do the job, but not having real interest or not enough time to engage with somebody that you hire. So like we're trying to do something with AI, we've hired like a subcontractor to do that work for us. Here's our theoretical description of the business case that we want to do something with, just go do it. No integration, no real communication, no back and forth on the ideas. So you're putting the people in a situation where it's very hard to win. And yeah, basically a plan of how you're going to approach it is needed regardless of whether or not you're using somebody on your own side or somebody externally. Self-check questions. Do we have a racing matrix in place? So who's responsible, who's accountable, who's communicated with, and who's informed of what we are doing on any given project? So basically communication levels and who's responsible for what. Do we have any prior experience with machine learning or, again, AI solutions generally that we are trying to do? If we do, then great. Who did it? How did they do it? Can we share that expertise with us? Can we free half a person's time or a full person's time for 4 to 6 weeks at least to build something specific? That person's time can be focused on the development itself. It can be focused on working with subcontractors. Does not matter. Do we have somebody who we can dedicate to a project like this? And fourth is, do we have the budget for it at the end? External, internal, there's a lot of governmental funds being invested in AI nowadays, so maybe you could be beneficiary of those. There are a lot of budgets, like I've shown in the beginning, that are being invested into AI developments that you can benefit from as well. So the money is there. That's the good part with AI, but it has to be found from somewhere. Otherwise, it's very hard to achieve what you're trying to achieve. So how do you raise your score? You can try ring fencing and try to use, people who are what they call an agile, like M-shaped or comb-shaped, people who are experts at several things at the same time and can ideally balance different things at the same time. You can try upskilling via quick win vendor workshops. So very similar to what I'm doing right now, but more in depth. based on a particular use case. I can definitely say that this is something that our company does. I can't say for everybody, but I'm sure that a lot of other companies do as well. So basically, you bring them a business case and you try to solve it with experts that are here to come in, solve your problem, and then leave. You don't need as much investment as you may expect. And of course, if you're lacking an understanding of who's responsible for what, a RASI matrix can help understand that. Now, talking about business stuff. So when we're talking about business, we need to understand that business usually drives technology. So that's why technology exists, at least in our current society. It would be hard for us to find any other relationship between business and technology. So technology exists to serve business goals. And on the scoring side, if we don't have a connection with C-level metrics or any other executive metrics or management metrics or business metrics, then we are in a bad place because it just becomes a tech-focused solution that nobody probably needs. And that in and of itself creates a problem with budgeting and expectations. Best case scenario is, you have a huge corporation, the CEO is all in on AI, does not want to fire anybody yet at least, and wants to help us get to the point with different implementations that we can just spend a lot of money on trying different things. Pitfalls here are, of course, AI for PR. Again, do we really need AI for that? So if we're just doing AI because the business people told us we need AI and we don't really understand what's the point of it and what measurable metric we are trying to influence, then it's probably not going to work, or at least you don't need to invest that much into it. There's also always the chasing of tech trends unrelated to current bottlenecks. So when I say AI, a lot of people immediately think ChatGPT, LLMs, right? But that is not all that AI is, and it's only very recently become so heavily associated with it. There's a lot of other things that go into the umbrella term of AI. And if you need AI, you may not need LLMs, you may need machine learning algorithms, you may need predictive data algorithms, you may need I don't know, you may need AGI, you may need real tangible intelligence to achieve what is it you're trying to achieve. So trends are still a problem even within the trend that we are analyzing right now. And of course, there's always how we're trying to sell our projects internally. So if you're selling the idea of us doing an AI solution, that AI solution can be full of fluff. So we're going to revitalize our current bottlenecks and recreate our synergies in order to benefit from more ROI. No numbers, nothing too specific. So if you're on a very high level, it's very hard to achieve something very quickly and very hard to quantify what it is that the AI solution may bring you. In order to assess yourself, try to understand this. So which line in the P&L will change if you see the P&L in your business, of course, not in your department, in your area of responsibility. So what specific line are we addressing with that AI solution? Second is, does it appear on a board slide today? Does the decision makers up top, or are we, if we are the decision makers up top, like me, for example, within my company, so am I thinking about this stuff? If a manager somewhere within my company comes and asks me to do like an AI insurance brokerage for everybody who goes on business trips, is that something that I'm going to be interested in or no? So that's a very important question that you ideally need to understand. And will we still fund this in a downturn? Also, very important one, you need not to underestimate it, because the overall market situation right now is not the most stable, I would say, especially depending on what kind of markets you're working with and where you are based. So like, it's very hard to predict. It's very hard to be very confident in your financials, especially if you're in a smaller end of companies out there. So if you understand that this is a project that you would invest in, even if your P&L is shrinking, even if you're in a crisis mode, even if you have to choose between this and something else, then it is a very good indicator that it is something that is worth doing. So how to raise score here? Map each use case to single executive-owned metric, so gross profit margin, churn, working capital days, whatever, depending on your business. Rephrase the project title in business, not tech language. So if you're a tech person trying to sell a AI idea to the board thinks in business metrics. So instead of saying like we are going to develop our own AI chatbot, say that we are going to lower the time of our customer service reps response rate from like 1 hour to 10 minutes. Same thing, different words. Next is sponsorships. So basically who is willing to support you, and whether or not that translates to financial support or any other support doesn't really matter. Financial support is better, but not necessarily so. So here we either have nothing, no one, so no budget, nobody supporting us, up until, like I said, a C-level executive being all in on the whole thing, just throwing money at us and hoping for the best. Typical pitfalls here is that somebody becomes interested and then just leaves, so ghost sponsors, so to speak. Second is the budgets are carved from existing IT budgets that are focused on real things here and now. You know, like if we don't do this thing, our servers will die, and we will not be able to work with our clients. This will always take priority regardless of how well you position your AI project. So the money comes back to them at a critical juncture, and a decision gridlock. So without a clear voice and a clear sponsor, or with one that is too loud, you can put yourself in a position where you cannot make a decision because you have too many different opinions and you don't have a consensus between those opinions. In order to self-check yourself, so who signs the check? Can they say yes alone? If the answer is yes, great. If that person is you, doubly great. Will the sponsor attend sprint reviews? So basically, are they engaged in the day-to-day development of the solution itself? Yes, great. No, maybe we should invite them from time to time at least. Is the budget OPEX or CAPEX? So are we working on internal company operation, or are we investing into the company's future? This will directly tie to whether or not we are budgeting from existing IT infrastructure, or are we investing something new? I wouldn't say that either. Sorry, I wouldn't say that either of those are better. Oh my God, my voice is happening. Much better, I think. So I wouldn't say that either of those are better, but it's definitely worth considering. Either you're investing or you're working on an existing solution already, or rather, an existing parts of the budgets within your company. And lastly, measurable KPIs. This is basically what this whole business thing is about. If you can measure it, then it's very easily to sell to the business. So best case scenario, everything is automated. You can see results like that. We've implemented a solution and leads have gotten cheaper. We've gotten more revenue. Everybody's happier. Worst case scenario, no baseline, data lag. Like we've done something, it takes us 6 months to develop a solution, then it will take us a couple of months to get information about that solution, and then it will take us a couple of months to implement changes. So data lag is bad here. Typical pitfalls are that we'll measure later once it's live. So try and measure from the very beginning, even if it feels like there is nothing to measure. If you're aiming at business KPIs, then you will probably have at least something that you can target. KPIs are that defined are too broadly. So like I said, customer happiness, what can you do with that? Success metrics that are owned by different department that is engaged. So in my example of customer service, so if you're in a completely different department and you're trying to influence customer service in a way, then it becomes very hard to actually showcase that value because you're too far away from them and they might not be interested in what you have going on. So to self-check, you can ask, can you pull yesterday's metrics in under 5 minutes? Under 5 minutes is a great turnaround for any business metric. So if you are longer, then it depends on how much, but 5 minutes is kind of a sweet spot. Are definitions agreed across teams? Do we even use the same lingo when we're talking about a project? So if we decided to call it an AI service bot, Does everybody understand that it's an AI service bot, or does somebody see it as just a bot? Does somebody see it as an AI service? Does somebody else see it as something else? And is there a control group for an A/B testing, basically? So can we exchange something within what we developed or implemented onto something else? Do we have like tweaking places? Can we easily tweak stuff within the implementation itself? Or are we just basing our assumptions on the broader things? Like, this is how it's been before, this is how it's become after, and that's it. To raise score, what you can do is just kind of have a snapshot of everything before you start. It's not, again, the best, but it's not the worst either. If you can pinpoint specific betterments that have happened after you've implemented a solution, then you can get yourself a lot more leeway moving forward. Second is, do we have very quick, lightweight instruments, basically? So mixed panel events, Zapier webhooks as an example. I feel that Zapier right now has so many integrations that you can just spend months combining your own that you need without spending a lot of time actually doing custom software, sorry. And third is assign a single KPI owner in writing. Small thing, but just project owner is this, project sponsor is this. We are trying to achieve this particular metric. Trust me, it will save you a lot of headache down the line. And with the speed that you're probably wanting to move, and you are going to be moving, it will create a lot of traction if you don't do this. Simple, but effective. Now, this is a simplified version, of course. So it's very hard for me to give you the whole overview of all the aspects of any organization that needs to do a self-assessment of whether or not they need AI. Good news is that we've actually written a white paper on this particular topic some time ago. It's still fairly fresh, but it's not completely new. So if you're interested in what I've said so far and want to go deeper into a self-assessment checklist, which you don't necessarily need to, but if you do want it, you can download it here with this QR code. You will get a white paper describing a more detailed, well, systemic probably approach to self-assessment. And those two together will kind of give you a more thorough 360-degree view of what you're trying to go and where you're trying to do. Those things should be enough for you to understand and ask and answer the question of, do you need AI for that? And if so, what that AI is being used for. Now let's talk about specifics. Now let's talk about use cases and how to approach those use cases. And maybe you will see yourselves in some of those cases that I'm going to be describing. So let's start with a mid-sized United Kingdom apparel e-commerce retailer. So basically a retailer out of the UK. They are about 50 million in revenue year over year, about 200,000 orders every month. And there are returns and refunds processes that are based on legacy tools like Magento, Zendesk, and Excel macros. This is what I always love to see. The problem is that the returns and the exchange queue averages 5,000 orders, which basically means 7-day refund delay. And as you can see, manual handling of those queries costs about £3.50 per return. Wages, errors, so on and so forth. So the customer service team spends about 30% of their time copy-pasting RMA information instead of doing upselling or doing something else within the organization that they might have been doing instead. But, upselling here was the key feature. Instead of earning more money, we are spending more money on upkeeping what we already have. So what can be done here? Let's look at our charts. Let's see what we have. So it is a simplified version, of course. So we are going to be talking about 3 main contenders for the title of the AI solution that will solve all our problems and woes. So first is an LLM-powered returns triage bot, basically addressing the main business need. The second one is a demand forecasting model. And the third is a personalized upsell recommender. So we are approaching the business problem from different angles. Do we address the problem of returns themselves, conversations with people and RMAs and information? Do we work on demand forecasting so we know when we need additional people power and additional focus and just kind of handle it sporadically? Or do we just outsource the outselling to an AI and let them do it? So as you can see, LLM powered returns triage bot wins. It has full support of the business. It is, well, technologically feasible, let's say. It has enough data to support us because that's the main business process. And we have the people to actually implement it. Maybe not the best, but we do have them. So why does it win? We have about 95,000 Zendesk tickets. So that gives us a lot of training data that is structured very, very, very well. It's uniform, it's historical, it's greatly well structured. I feel like I'm repeating myself, but still, it's very hard to underestimate the access to good data that you can base a solution on top of it. Then we have the integration to Syntax API and existing RMA microservice. So the whole environment is not too complex. We're not handling a bunch of dozens different microservices. We're not connected to a myriad other departments. We are fairly self-contained, which is good. We already track success metrics daily. They are easy to calculate, easy to predict. So cost per return, refund turnarounds. And we have a sponsor in the, well, being the COO, who owns the P&L and basically helps us throughout the whole process, skimming a lot of the layers of the organization. Long story short, the outcome is cutting costs per return to about £2, so minus 44%. The refund delay comes from like 7 days to 2 days. And in the end, we also boosted our Trustpilot by 0.3 stars, which of course positively impacts the business and helps us bring more business in with the added benefits of people having more time to actually upsell this business. Small change, fairly technologically feasible, at the same time, very impactful. Let's move on to another example, a mid-sized Dutch edtech platform. So let's imagine a Netherlands-based online learning provider. About 175 monthly active learners across vocational and corporate training courses. We have a tutor team of about 32 answers and questions and intercom, peak load evenings and Sunday nights. Courses after work on the weekends. Annual revenue is about 34 million. B2B licenses, course fees. So the problem with that business is that the first response time is about 8 hours. And the course completion rate due to that slips to 59%. Tutors on their own spend 18% of paid hours replying to repeat, frequently asked questions, and that payroll is about $1 million a year. So what can be done? We again have 3 options. Again, we of course had more, but that's the 3 runner-ups. We have an LLM tutor assist bot, we have a dropout risk predictor, and we have adaptive learning path recommender. So out of those 3, the LLM tutor assist bot wins with all 9s from the business and some concerns from the tech team, but still realistically feasible. So why does it win? First and foremost, again, data. We have more than 22,000 historical chat transcripts tagged by topic. So we understand what kind of questions are repeated, we understand what we can answer to those questions, and we understand that there is enough volume there at least to build a systemized solution on top of that. There's also low integration friction. So Intercom allows us to webhook to an LMS and basically do not touch the core platform at all. So it's fairly easy to connect one thing with the other without having to build anything complex. We have clear success metrics. So response time, tutor time, everything tracked, everything transparent. Immediately we can feel the impact. And again, we have a strong sponsor in the head of learner success who owns both tutor budget and retention KPIs. So the outcome here is cutting median response time to about 1.3 hours instead of 8, 84%, and we've freed about a fourth of every tutor's time to do other things. So as you may agree, spending real people's time working on answering the same questions, not the best use of that time. That is an ideal use case scenario for an LLM. Next one is the Belgian multi-brand specialty retailer. So we have about 58 high street stores and a web shop, about 125 million annual turnover and 26,000 SKUs. 8 merge planners juggle ERP forecasts and weekly Excel overrides. The stockouts on 50% of those SKUs during promos, overstocks are up to 7.2 million in working capital. Reorder cycle is labor intensive, missing regional demand spikes from social campaigns. So we have a lot of unused stock, and it's very hard to predict when that unused stock will become relevant, if it will become relevant at all. So what can we do? How can AI help? So we have a computer vision shelf gap alert system, which is pretty good as an idea. We analyze the shelves, we can have a inherent, very fast understanding of which shelves are full for how long and which ones are not. Then we have a dynamic price optimizer, which can help us adapt our overdue or overlong inventory to sell it much faster if we adjust the pricing just a little bit at the right time. Or we have the ML machine learning, demand forecasting, and auto reordering system, basically addressing the problem of when we stock and what do we stock. As you can see, business is again all for the restocking things. Technological factors are a bit less balanced as they were in previous examples. So we do have the data due to the amount and the large of the size, of the organization, but the complexity and the availability of the people here is a question. Nevertheless, this is the one that has been decided and has been successful. So why does it win? Well, first and foremost, of course, is again the data. 3 years of daily sales by store, so that's a very strong training set for any model that we are aiming to implement. Second is the build is fairly contained, so it uses existing cloud infrastructure and warehouse, and we use the existing ERP purchase or APIs, and there is no specific hardware that is needed in terms of like cameras, as in the computer vision one, for example. Third is, of course, the direct P&L impact. It hits both margin and working capital KPIs the CFO already tracks. So we know the returns, we know the amount of SKUs, we know basically everything about the stocking and the sales process, so it's very easy to address those problems head on. And of course, fourth is clear ownership. So merchandising director sponsors and controls the buying budget. We have somebody who is directly interested in its success. The outcome here is that stockouts were lowered by about 4.4%. Excess inventory was reduced by 1.8 million, and the projected annual gross margin lift is about 1.5 million. So at the end of the day, for a couple of months' work, it's a pretty nice starting point at the very least. And if we were to decide to go for another solution, we might have spent much more and gained much less. Here, it works out pretty well. Next, we have the Swiss vertical SaaS vendor, so a Zurich-based company that provides subscription analytics dashboards to about 170 mid-market customers, manufacturing, logistics, and burger. The overall turnover is about 10 million francs, team of about 35 people. So much smaller business than what I've talked about so far. The problem is churn. I'm sure if you are working in SaaS, you're familiar with that type of problem. So we have our churn at 8.2%, while the board insists on at least 6%. Support backlog here averages 900 how do I tickets per quarter. So basically very basic questions that are repeating again and again and again, with them costing about 6.4 francs per ticket. And basically sales managers like a systemic way to spot at-risk accounts before the renewal talk. So salespeople need better environment to actually sell. Let's look at the value matrix here. So we have a tier 1 support chatbot addressing those support tickets. We have a churn risk predictor, and we have a dynamic in-app onboarding tutor. So either we work with supporting, with onboarding, or with churn. I'm guessing you already understand why the churn one was chosen. It's a very, very impactful metric, very easy sell to any business leader, especially in a SaaS environment. If we're going to address churn directly, you'll probably have your sponsors lined up for you very, very easily. So why does it win? Again, we have data. Product emits detailed usage events per tenant. Good signal for churn models. So basically, we have a bit of an insight why people churn. We don't have ideal data. We don't have a complete analysis of why the churn happens and what is the customer behavior behind it, but we have enough signals in order to build something on top of that. Second is, of course, again, contained. So it uses Snowflake warehousing and simple logistic regression in Python. So no live model servicing needed, and scores run nightly. So it just repeats and does the scoring. Third is, of course, direct to P&L, like I said, churn. And fourth is strong sponsor. Because if you're working on churn, you always have a person who is directly responsible and directly interested in tracking that churn. So the outcome in the end is 32 at-risk logos were flagged, and targeted outreach helped save 11 out of them. Could it have been more? Could it have been less? It's hard to judge, but it definitely gives more control to the salespeople. It definitely builds more control of the organization overall. Churn was down to 6.9% annualized, which is worth about 130 ARR, so it's not perfect. The board is still not happy, but it's much, much closer to a place where they would be at least content with the situation. And you can imagine it's much easier to build the next steps to lower churn even more. And the salespeople time is freed from spray and pray into high value coaching. So basically focusing on those at-risk logos, focusing on upsales, focusing on their target accounts and not on, some would say, useless information regurgitation. Next, we have a Belgian insurance broker, and we are almost nearing the end. So a Brussels-based broker specializing in small and medium enterprises commercial policies, about 18,000 active policies, 24 people, 7 handlers, and 4 underwriters, 3 customer service agents. So the problem here is that the claim cycle averages around 12 days, 12 and a half days, which hurts client retention. Fraudulent or non-covered claims cost an estimated 300,000, and manual claim triage consumes about 55% of handler hours at approximately 40 euros per claim. Look at the AI value matrix, and what do we have? So again, claims triage machine learning model, or a customer frequently asked questions chatbot, or an underwriting risk score engine. I have seen cases where a risk score engine would be the definite go-to, but in this particular case, the claims triage machine learning model won out because, the leadership was very much focused on the business metrics of triages overall. And this heavily addresses specifically that. Again, business KPIs rule the day. So why does it win? We have a 5-year history of structured claim files. Data, who would have guessed? Gives us 11,000 labeled examples. We use existing Azure AI services and brokers SQL data warehouse, so no new infrastructure, no new clouds, no new servers, no nothing. We have direct P&L impact, so we lower claim leakage and handler labor cost, and the operations director owns both claims budget and customer NPS, so sponsorship is very, very, very strong. The outcome here is that we average claim lifecycle. We cut the average lifecycle to about 9 days. We reduce suspected fraud leakage by 60,000 every year, and we free almost one full person for higher value tasks moving forward. And last but not least, a large-scale US chemical manufacturer. So we have a company out of Houston that is producer of specialty polymers serving automotive, medical, and consumer goods, OEMs. 5 continuous flow plants, raw material spend about 300 million, annual output roughly 800,000 tons. The problem here is that the first pass yield is stuck at 92%. Every last point wastes about 5.5 million in feedstock. The process engineers rely on manual set point rules, and plant variability leads to reruns and overtime. Volatile feedstock prices increased cost of goods by about 8% last year. So basically, the quality of the production is, I wouldn't say low, but its efficiency could have been much higher, especially at the first pass yield section of the manufacturing process. Let's take a look at the matrix and try and decide, should we do anything, or if so, what should we do? So here we have the predictive maintenance for polymer reactors, making higher yields because we maintain reactors better, Scope 3 emissions tracker for supply chain management, and a yield optimization model. This last one wins, and why does it win? Because we have good signals. We have temperature, we have pressure, we have catalyst ratios that we log for every 10 seconds for 5 years. So there's an abundance of data that we can leverage and influence. We have feasible deployment. So model runs as an edge service that writes new set points to the distributed control system, no planned hardware swaps. We have direct P&L link. So yield, again, is in the center of the business case. And we have clear ownership. VP Operation controls both yield KPI and overtime budget, and is the project sponsor in this case. So the outcome here is that we have raised the first pass yield to about 94.4% thanks to having access to better data, or rather having a clearer view of the data that we already have. We fell scrap by about 1,500 tons, and projected annual savings are about 10 million with a payback of 7 weeks. Again, that's after the solution has been implemented, not before, but still, once it has been up and running, the projected savings are far outweigh any expense the solution may have cost. To sum up everything that I have told you today and why the things that I've talked about, why they work, there is a very boring pattern. This is what I understood, at least in my own narrow point of view, that the successful stories are often boring. You don't really hear the hypey things that change the markets here and now. That's something that exists within startups, sure, but not in your run-of-the-mill, like more traditional businesses, I would say. So here you have the very specific quick win quadrant on the value matrix. Each high score, each winning solution scored at least 7 on tech and at least 8 on business. In our cases, and most of the time, it was even 9. So is it feasible enough? And is the business really interested in it? So that's the winning combination, in my opinion. The business needs to be more interested than the feasibility of the tech itself. When they are, tech feasibility is possible as long as you put the right people in the right places. But if they aren't, if the balance to implement anything substantial. Second is clean, readily accessible data. The more data that you have, the better the outcome of any solution that you're trying to implement, AI or otherwise, honestly. But AI solutions are specifically very vulnerable to inefficient data or bad quality data. Third is a one particular KPI that already exists. So you don't need to come up with something to sell a spaceship that may never go nowhere. It's about a very particular use case in a very particular department in a very particular company, always. You always have a particular specific sponsor who is the budget owner. most of the time. I wouldn't say that that's a prerequisite that is really needed, but it does very much help. And of course, measurable business deliverables. So if you can sell it to your board, then you can sell basically anything in terms of the development. If you cannot, then you are probably very limited on what you can realistically do. And that brings us to a close. Thank you very much for joining me today. This QR code leads to my LinkedIn. If we aren't already connected, feel free to connect with me. And if you have any questions that I wasn't able to answer here today, I will gladly answer them, privately or in a separate session or whatever. I hope it was useful to you. If it is, do tell me. If it isn't, you can also tell me, but I'm probably going to be very upset about that. So choose your time correctly. But yeah, thank you very much.